So today's poster is about Lava. This is our last year paper, which was part of the DARPA Learning with Less Labels program. So it's a method of efficient visual transfer learning. So the idea quickly is that you start from a pre-trained model on a large label data set such as ImageNet. And the aim is to fine-tune this model to a target data set, which is potentially in a different visual domain with a handful of label data. So the traditional mainstream methods of doing this is to just use supervised pre-training on the ImageNet dataset and then supervised fine-tuning on the target dataset. So in this paper, we identified two types of representation collapse that happens when you actually do this vanilla method with a handful of labeled examples. Those are called class collapse and domain collapse, and I can elaborate on that further on the poster. And accordingly, we designed a solution which consists of like a threefold approach. So we use self-supervised pre-training as opposed to supervised training. And we also use language. So we use a semantically meaningful label to actually supervise the model as opposed to the one-hot labels that is usually used. And finally, we also introduce a novel method for pseudo-labeling called multi-crop pseudo-labels, which leverage multi-crop augmentations to transfer in a more robust way or obtain more robust pseudo-labels. So our method achieved state-of-the-art across different benchmarks within the public domain and also the proprietary domain of DARPA. So yeah, if you're interested to hear more, I'll see you in the poster. Thank you.
Hi, hello. This work is done by mainly the student Mingjin, who is a PhD student supervised by Shrey and myself. And the work is on graph representation learning. So graphs are a very common representation mechanism because lots of real-world phenomena and data can be very naturally represented as graphs. So graph representation learning has been a really, really hot topic these days. And many of the graph representation learning techniques, especially those based on neural networks, they rely on the availability of labeled data, so labels on nodes, and etc. So in this work, what we propose to do is to propose a self-supervised learning technique without assuming label information is available. So what we do here is that one of the main two things we do here is that we generate augmented views of graph from the local neighborhood-based perspective and a global perspective so that we have a bunch of different views for the same subgraph. And secondly, we use a kind of bootstrapping technique where we have two networks in a Siamese structure where we have a target network and an online network. One is updated a bit more quickly than the other, and the one network learns, so the target network learns from the online network. So by putting these two techniques together, we have designed an effective and efficient graph representation learning technique that is able to achieve, back then, state-of-the-art performance on 5 real-world graph data sets. And if you want to know more about the technique, please come to me, come to talk to me after the poster session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Qihong from DSAI. So today I would like to talk about my previous paper published in ECCV. So the first author is my previous master student, and this paper is about skeleton-based human interaction recognition. That's to say, using the pulse joins to recognize the human interaction categories, such as taking a photo, shaking hands, pushing, punching, kicking, and so on. And this task is actually quite important in various applications, such as human-robot interaction, but actually it's very challenging. And we observe that actually there are two cues that are very important to recognize the interaction categories. One important cue is the semantic correspondence. For example, in taking a photo, one person will have a hand posture of holding the camera, and the other person will have a hand posture of yeah. And we call this as a semantic correspondence of the interactive body parts. And the other important cue is the distance evolution. For example, in shaking the hands, and the two hands are gradually approaching to each other. So in order to capture these two important cues, we introduce a novel module to model the important cues, model the interactive body parts as graphs. And in particular, we introduce a semantic-based graph to capture the semantic correspondence of the interactive body parts. And we also construct a distance graph to capture the distance information. And we incorporate this normal module into the transformer. And we conduct experiment on the most challenging NTU data set. And we achieve the state-of-the-art performance. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much. So this is one of the first papers we did on honeybee tracking and pollination monitoring. So as all you know that honeybees are very important for pollination and for production, but tracking them and monitoring them with computer vision is a very difficult task. In this paper, we proposed a hybrid detection algorithm which consists of a deep learning detection model and a background subtraction-based detection model to detect and track honeybees. And it also consists of an occlusion detection algorithm to track honeybees among occlusions when they forage in natural environments. And so this paper was able to achieve a higher detection rate in a faster tracking time compared to the state of the art then. And we applied these techniques to monitor pollination in agriculture setups as well as natural environments. You can, if you are interested about knowing more, you can come to and talk to me during the post session, and you can scan this QR code to see our latest research as well. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I think we all know by now that we're facing, apart from a climate crisis, also facing a big biodiversity crisis. And at the heart of that, what is there is a biodiversity data crisis. We simply don't know what is where and in which quantities. And AI can contribute quite a lot to trying to solve that. And one of the methods is, apart from remote sensing and vision, is acoustics. So going into the environment, just listening to it, and having the AI interpret what is there and what quantities. The traditional method of doing that is that you go into the field, you take a recorder out, 2 months later you go back and you retrieve the data physically. But a lot of these sites are extremely remote. Like to some of the sites that we're working with, you take 2.5 days to get there. They also don't have any communication. What that means is that you can only use satellite communication. And the implication of that is that you can't communicate the audio data, you need the result data to be communicated because the link doesn't allow you more. So you need to run everything on the device, and to make things a little bit harder, there are these little devices there that are driven by a button cell, essentially, and have 256K of memory. Right? So how do you run recognition with the quality of a cloud-based model on this type of device? And that's exactly what Mohammed is going to tell you about if you visit the poster. Which leaves us a minute for questions.